My grandmother stood up at my sister's wedding reception and said, loud enough for the entire table to hear, I've been sending you $3,500 every single month for 4 years. Sweetheart, I hope it helped with nursing school. I put down my fork. The room didn't go quiet. The music was still playing. Someone across the room was laughing at something. A waiter was refilling champagne glasses 2 tables over. None of that stopped. But for me, everything just stopped. $3,500 a month? 4 years. That's $168,000. I did the math in about 4 seconds, and I wish I hadn't, because the number sat in my chest like something cold and heavy. I graduated 8 months ago with $62,000 in student loan debt. I've been working double shifts at the hospital 3 times a week, trying to pay it down. I eat rice and canned soup 4 nights a week, not because I enjoy it, but because the interest on my loans compounds faster than my paycheck can catch up. Last winter, I skipped buying a winter coat and wore my old one with the broken zipper held shut with a safety pin because I told myself I couldn't justify the expense. And my grandmother had been sending $3,500 a month to my parents for 4 years. I looked at my mother. She was smiling, but it had gone tight around the edges. She reached over and put her hand on my grandmother's arm and said, lightly, the way she always does when she's trying to redirect something, Mom, this really isn't the time. Of course it is, my grandmother said. She looked at me. Not at my mother. At me. Isn't it, sweetheart? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Let me back up. My name is Claire. I'm 28 years old and I work as a registered nurse at a hospital in Vancouver. I grew up in a suburb outside the city, the kind of neighborhood where the houses all look the same and everyone has a golden retriever and a Costco membership and a very specific idea of what success is supposed to look like. My parents are both in finance. My father works in private wealth management. My mother has her own bookkeeping firm. They are, by any external measure, comfortable people. Nice house, 2 cars, both leased. They go to Mexico every February. My mother gets her nails done every 2 weeks and considers it a necessity. My sister Lauren is 26. She's beautiful in the way that people notice immediately, and she's always known it, and I don't say that unkindly, it's just true. She married a man named Derek who works in commercial real estate and who I have always found slightly exhausting. The wedding was at a vineyard in the Okanagan. It was gorgeous. 300 guests, an open bar, a live band, a photo booth, a late-night poutine station. My parents paid for it, or at least they said they did. I paid for my own nursing school. Or I thought I did. I took out the maximum federal and provincial student loans I qualified for. I worked 20 hours a week all 4 years. I deferred everything I could. I ate in the campus cafeteria when I had meal plan credits left and made instant noodles when I didn't. I told myself this was just what it cost to build something real. My grandmother, my mother's mother, is a woman named Edith. She's 79 years old, and she lives in a condo in North Vancouver, and she reads 2 books a week and does the Globe and Mail crossword every morning in pen. She is the sharpest person I know. She was an accountant for 35 years before she retired. She does not miss things. She also, I knew, had money. My grandfather had been a contractor, and when he died 12 years ago, he left her the house, the savings, and a portfolio that had been quietly growing ever since. She had mentioned once, not to show off, but just in passing, that she wanted to make sure her grandchildren were taken care of, that she had set money aside, that she knew how hard it was to start out. I thanked her. I didn't ask for details. That felt rude. I had no idea she'd been sending money to my parents every month for 4 years under the assumption that it was going to me. I found out at my sister's wedding. The months leading up to that day had been hard in a specific, grinding way. I had started doing the math on my loans more seriously because I'd read an article about interest capitalization that scared me, and the numbers didn't add up the way I needed them to. I was making my minimum payments plus whatever extra I could manage, and the balance was going down, but slowly. So slowly. I had started picking up agency shifts at a second hospital on my days off. I told myself it was temporary. That's what I kept saying, temporary. Just until I got ahead of the interest. Just until the balance dropped below $50,000. Then I'd give myself a break. I hadn't taken a weekend off in 4 months by the time Lauren's wedding came around. My mother had called me 2 weeks before the wedding to remind me that I needed to get my hair done before the rehearsal dinner. She had already booked me an appointment, she said it, as though she was doing me a favor and gave me the address of her salon in Yaletown. I looked up the salon online afterward. The blowout was $120. I didn't say that out loud. I just went and smiled and said thank you and put it on my credit card. At the rehearsal dinner, My mother made a toast about how proud she was of Lauren, how Derek was everything she could have hoped for in a son-in-law, how watching their daughter find love was the greatest gift a parent could receive. It was a lovely toast. People cried. I sat at the table and drank my water and thought about the agency shift I'd turned down to be there. My grandmother was seated beside me that night. She squeezed my hand when she sat down and asked how work was going. I told her it was good. Busy, but good. She nodded in that way she has. Thoughtful and a little searching, like she's reading something behind what you actually said. Are you sleeping enough? She asked. Sure, I said. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, I'm glad the money has been helping. I thought she meant something vague. Emotional support. The general sense of having family behind you. I said. It really means a lot, Grandma. She smiled and patted my hand and we moved on. I didn't understand what she meant until the next afternoon, at the reception, when she stood up. She hadn't planned to make a speech. That wasn't on the program. My mother gave her a look that I know very well. It's the look she gives when something is happening that she did not approve in advance, but my grandmother just smiled pleasantly and kept standing. She said she was so happy to be there. That watching Lauren get married was a beautiful thing. That family was everything. And then, looking directly at me, she said it. I've been sending you $3,500 every single month for 4 years. Sweetheart, I hope it helped with nursing school. The silence at our table was its own kind of sound. My father picked up his champagne glass and set it down again without drinking. Lauren was looking at her new husband. My mother said, again, more firmly this time, Mom, I just want to make sure Claire knows how proud I am, my grandmother said. Getting through nursing school on your own? Working so hard? You didn't have to do any of that alone, you know? And there it was. She thought I knew. She thought the money had been reaching me all along. She thought that when I said it meant a lot, I meant the $3,500 a month she had been sending to my parents every single month since September of my first year. I looked at my mother. She was looking at the centerpiece. I said, very quietly, because the table next to ours was close, and I am not someone who makes scenes, Mom. She looked up. Did you receive money from Grandma for my school? The pause was about 2 seconds long. In those 2 seconds, I watched her decide something. I watched her choose. Claire, this is Lauren's day, she said. I know, I said. Did you receive money from Grandma for my school? My father said, this isn't appropriate. Did you receive money from Grandma for my school? I said it a third time because I needed an answer and I was starting to understand that I wasn't going to get one. Not here. Not like this. And the understanding of that was its own separate, terrible thing. My grandmother had gone very still. She was looking at my mother with an expression I hadn't seen on her face before. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something quieter. Like recognition. She sat down. She opened her purse, which was small and beaded and sitting on the chair beside her, and she took out her phone. I didn't know what she was doing. I thought maybe she needed a moment. I sat there with my hands in my lap and tried to breathe normally and tried to not think about what $168,000 could have meant. No debt. An actual savings account. Maybe a small down payment someday on something modest. 4 years of not eating canned soup and wearing a coat with a broken zipper and telling myself it would get easier. My mother reached over and put her hand on my arm. We can talk about this at home, she said. She was using her soft voice, her let's be reasonable voice. There's obviously been some confusion, and we can sort it out. But today is about Lauren. Is there money sitting in an account somewhere with my name on it? I asked. Claire. Because if there is, I'd like to know. Everything we received from your grandmother went to. She paused, and I watched her searching for the word expenses. Household expenses. Things that benefited the whole family. You lived at home during summers. We fed you. We covered things you don't even know about. $3,500 a month, I said. For 4 years. Family finances are complicated, my father said. He had picked up the champagne glass again and was turning it in his hand. You wouldn't understand the full picture. I want to tell you that I said something sharp and perfect in response to that. I didn't. I just looked at him, and then I looked at my grandmother, and she was still looking at her phone, and her jaw was set, and she looked, in that moment, like someone who had just finished making a decision. Lauren leaned over from her seat and said, in a low, urgent voice, Can everyone please just get through tonight? This is my wedding. And because I loved my sister, even then, even in that moment, I said okay. I picked up my fork. I ate the salmon. I smiled when the photographer came by. I danced one song. I said goodbye to relatives I hadn't seen in years and answered their questions about the hospital and said yes, I loved the work. Yes, It was demanding. Yes, I was really proud to be a nurse. Inside, I felt like something had shifted on a molecular level and nothing was going to go back to where it had been. I drove back to Vancouver the next morning. My grandmother called me before I'd even hit the highway. "I need to ask you something directly," she said, "and I need you to answer me honestly." "Okay," I said. "Did you ever receive any money from me? Any transfers, any checks, anything at all?" "No," I said. The silence lasted long enough that I checked the phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "I see," she said finally. "Grandma, I didn't even know you were sending anything." I thought. "I know," she said. "I know you didn't know. That's not what I'm upset about." Another pause. "How much debt do you have right now?" I told her. "All of it. The loans, the interest rate, the current balance, how long my projections said it would take me to pay it off if I kept doing what I was doing." I'd never said the numbers out loud to anyone before, and hearing them in my own voice while driving through the Fraser Valley was a very specific kind of awful. She listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "I'm going to need a few days." I didn't know what that meant. I said okay, and we said goodbye. And I drove the rest of the way home thinking about how my parents had looked at that table. My father, with the champagne glass, my mother and her soft voice and her word expenses. I went to work the next day. I went to work the day after that. I picked up a shift I hadn't planned on taking because the ward was short-staffed, and I said yes before I even thought about it, which is what happens when saying yes to extra work has become automatic. I didn't call my parents. They didn't call me. My grandmother called again on the Thursday, 9 days after the wedding. "I've been doing some work," she said. "I'd like you to come for lunch on Saturday if you can." She lived in a modest 2-bedroom condo with a view of the water and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee. I'd had lunch there dozens of times growing up. It was one of my favorite places. When I arrived, she had sandwiches made in a folder sitting on the kitchen table. It was thick, held shut with an elastic band. She poured coffee and sat down across from me and put her hand flat on the folder. "I'm going to tell you what I found," she said, "and then I'm going to tell you what I've decided to do. And I'd like you to listen to the whole thing before you say anything." I nodded. She had gone back through 4 years of bank records. Every transfer she had sent, she sent them on the 15th of every month, without fail, since September of my first year of nursing school. She had been sending them to my parents' joint account, which my mother had given her the information for, telling her it was the easiest way to make sure the money reached me quickly. She had kept records of every single transfer. She had a spreadsheet. Of course she had a spreadsheet. She was an accountant for 35 years. Total transfers over 4 years, $168,000. Total amount I received, 0. She had also, in the 9 days since the wedding, spoken to a lawyer, not to threaten anyone. She was clear about that, just to understand what she was looking at. The lawyer had explained the concept of a resulting trust, that when money is given to someone with the intention of benefiting a third party, and the third party never receives it, the courts can find that the money was never truly a gift to the recipient and can order it returned or redirected. She had also updated her will. She opened the folder and took out a piece of paper and slid it across the table. It was a letter, formal, on her lawyer's letterhead, addressed to my parents. It stated that the funds transferred over the previous 4 years had been intended for my education and living expenses, that it had come to her attention those funds had not reached me, and that she was requesting an accounting of how the money had been used. It also stated that any further transfers had been suspended indefinitely. The second document was a deed of gift, also prepared by her lawyer. She had decided to give me her condo. She had bought it outright 12 years ago, and it had no mortgage. She wanted to transfer it to my name. She would continue living in it, the letter explained, under a life tenancy agreement, meaning I would own it, but she had the legal right to live there for the rest of her life, and I had no desire to ever change that, and I told her so. The current assessed value of the condo was listed at the bottom. I had to read the number twice. She also handed me a check. It was for $62,000, the exact amount of my student loan debt. I stared at it for a long time. "Grandma," I said. My voice came out very strange. "You worked for 4 years under a disadvantage you didn't know you had," she said. "I'm not able to give you back the time, but I can do this." I started crying, which I hadn't planned on. I am not generally a crier. I cried at a hospital once, in a supply closet, after a really bad shift, and I felt embarrassed about it for a week. But sitting in my grandmother's kitchen with her hand over mine and a check for $62,000 on the table and the deed to a condo in North Vancouver, I completely lost it. She handed me a paper napkin. which is such a practical grandmother thing to do that it almost made me laugh through the crying. My parents received the lawyer's letter the following Tuesday. My mother called me that evening. The conversation started in a place I recognized immediately: the soft voice, the reasonableness, the "we're all adults here" tone that she uses when she wants to manage something back under control. She said she understood why I was upset. She said there had been miscommunication. She said the money had gone toward family obligations that I benefited from indirectly. She said that Grandma was elderly and sometimes confused about what she'd given and to whom, and that it wasn't fair to take her at her word on financial matters without getting the full picture. I said, "I have 4 years of bank records, Mom. Transfers on the 15th of every month. Do you want me to send them to you?" Silence. "The lawyer's letter also asks you to account for how the money was used," I said. "I'd be curious to hear that too." My mother said that she didn't appreciate being spoken to this way. I said I didn't appreciate graduating with $62,000 in debt while $168,000 sat somewhere I couldn't access. She said I was being dramatic. I said I was being precise, actually, which was different. She hung up. My father texted me that night. It was a long text, which surprised me. My father is not a long text person. He said that the family had always operated as a unit, that they had carried expenses over the years that I didn't see or appreciate, that my grandmother's money had gone into the household and the household had supported me, and that this was how families worked, and that I was fracturing something irreparable by pursuing this. I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and made tea and stood at my kitchen window looking at the street below for a while. What I kept coming back to was this. My mother knew my grandmother thought the money was reaching me. She had let her believe that for 4 years. Every time my grandmother asked how I was doing, every time she patted my hand and said she was glad the money was helping, my mother had let it stand. That wasn't miscommunication. That was a choice, made again and again. For 4 years. Lauren called me 2 weeks later. It was the first time we'd spoken since the wedding. She said she wasn't taking sides. She said family situations were complicated and she didn't have all the information. She said she hoped I wasn't going to let this ruin my relationship with my parents because they did love me. She believed that. She also said, almost as an afterthought, that she had known my grandmother sent money every month because she'd overheard my parents talking about it years ago, and she'd assumed I knew too. I asked her why she'd never mentioned it to me. She said she didn't think it was her place. I said, very carefully, "Lauren, if you had told me 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, or 1 year ago, I could have talked to Grandma. I could have figured out what was happening. I had $62,000 in debt that I have been killing myself to pay off." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I'm sorry, Claire. I really am." I believed her. Lauren is not a malicious person. She just moved through the world assuming things would work out, and they usually did for her. And she didn't always look hard at the things she was stepping over. The transfer of the condo took about 6 weeks to finalize. My grandmother's lawyer handled most of it. I paid off my student loans in full in October, which is something I had genuinely stopped believing would ever happen before I was 40. I stood in my kitchen on a Tuesday night after the confirmation email came through, and I let myself feel it, really feel it for about 10 minutes. Then I poured a glass of wine and called my grandmother, and she answered on the second ring, and I could hear that she was happy, and that was worth more than I can explain. I still see my parents occasionally. Christmas last year was careful and surface level, and everyone was polite in the way you are when something real is sitting in the middle of the table and no one is going to name it. My mother has never said sorry. My father has never said sorry. I don't think they will. What I've come to understand slowly, and not without a lot of late-night thinking about it, is that they probably didn't start out with a plan. I think my grandmother offered, and my mother gave her the account number, and the money came in, and then it just became part of the household income, absorbed and spent and rationalized. It's a very human thing, honestly. The capacity to take something that doesn't belong to you and build a story around it until the story feels true. The thing they couldn't have predicted was my grandmother's records. 35 years as an accountant. Transfers on the 15th of every month, logged and dated and backed up. The folder on the kitchen table. They thought that because I didn't know, I would never know. They thought my grandmother was a generous, trusting elderly woman who sent money out of love and asked nothing in return and would never sit down with a lawyer and a 4-year spreadsheet and a deed of gift and decide that enough was enough. They were wrong about her. They've always been wrong about her. I'm writing this from my grandmother's condo, my condo now. I'm still getting used to saying that. She's in the other room reading, and I can hear the occasional sound of her turning a page. The view from the window is the water and the mountains and the last bit of the evening light doing something beautiful over the inlet. I'm not angry anymore. Not most of the time. What I feel more than anything is something closer to relief at the debt being gone. Yes, but more than that, relief at knowing the truth, at not walking around anymore with a version of my own life that had a lie built into the foundation. My grandmother stood up at my sister's wedding and said something that turned my world over. She didn't know she was doing it. She thought she was just saying she was proud of me. She was right, though. I did do it on my own, just not in the way any of us had understood. Where are you listening from right now? Drop it in the comments. And if this story hit close to home, I think more people will know this feeling than want to admit it.